More MIP right after this.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been some time and we've not talked since a lot of the latest developments with Tucker Carlson, so we're anxious to get all caught up with the president of Media Matters for America, our good friend, Angelo Carusone, who's celebrating a birthday this week. Happy birthday, Angelo.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. It's very nice.
Yeah, so, well, let's start here. Fox asked Media Matters to stop reporting on and disclosing Tucker Carlson's texts.
Yeah, I mean, we had a bunch of leaked videos, and they had told us, they had threatened us that they would, I guess, sue us or try to sue us if we continued to publish them. And what was kind of remarkable about that is, and most of the videos that we were publishing were related to exposing some truth, which is, one of them was Tucker Carlson talking about how Fox Nation, which is their streaming service, is both, it doesn't perform well, but more importantly, he basically questioned the narrative that Fox has been telling people, which is that they have a lot of viewers. He was sort of undermining that public data, suggesting that really they don't really have any subscribers. There were all sort of like little snippets to illustrate, Fox attacking his colleagues, some of the misogyny, and it sort of lined up with these other things that were coming out, but people respond better to the visual. And so they threatened us. We continue to publish the videos, and I mean, it is kind of laughable. I mean, even right-wing conservatives were sort of ripping on Fox for suggesting that we shouldn't be publishing leaked material. It's a leak, and you get to publish leaks. That's the way the news works. So they don't really have much of a leg to stand on there. I mean, I think the bigger part of it, though, actually illustrates this tension that Fox is having right now, which is that they're being pretty aggressively attacked by, what should be their fans, by conservatives, by their audience. They're not just losing their audience. They're also being kicked on the way out. So the audience is backlashing against them. And there was this emerging narrative that Fox News was working with Media Matters to make Tucker Carlson look bad. And that was being pushed by Megyn Kelly, by Glenn Beck. These are all people that have left Fox. They were sort of pushing this idea that Fox was actually working with us. And I think part of the legal threat was as much to try to get us to stop as it was about trying to have something that Fox executives could point to say, look, how could you say we're working with them? We just threatened them. I think it was as a little bit of cover.
Well, and you and I also actually haven't talked since Tucker's removal in the first place.
Yeah.
And it happened, and then there was speculation. Now, hasn't it been confirmed that his removal was a stipulation in the settlement with Dominion?
That's what some are saying. I'm not sure that, I think that is, I feel like that, again, that's another one of these things that Fox is sort of putting out there to try to give themselves a little bit of cover from this. I think the reason why, and I think the way that you frame the question too sort of gets to it, is that part of why we don't know definitively why Tucker Carlson was fired, I think is a little bit up by design. It's intentional. Because I can only look at what changed from before and after the termination. And I do think the Dominion stuff was tied into it. I don't think it was that they forced it, though. One of the things that kind of got lost is that around 3:13 that day of the settlement, the judge had issued an order appointing a special master from the court to investigate Rupert Murdoch. And that kind of gets lost. But basically what the judge had determined is that Rupert Murdoch had withheld documents that should have been disclosed, a lot of documents. And when he appointed a court special master, what that provides is essentially this third party who is empowered to go in and do the investigation himself, to actually dig. So which means you start to uncover a whole bunch of material that otherwise wouldn't have been out there. That happened at 3:13. Immediately after that order came through, Fox put on a piece of paper that their settlement number had not changed. It had been about $500 million for at that point for days. They then put on a piece of paper another $250 million and slid it across the courtroom table to Dominion. And that's what had happened. My personal assessment of this is that we shouldn't discount the significance of why they increased their settlement number and how much the Murdoch special master tied into that. And if you're the Murdochs, what you need in that moment is an explanation for your board and for the subsequent lawsuits that are about to emerge from your shareholders. You need to explain why you held your position at $500 million for weeks at that point, and then suddenly increased it to $250 million. And if you think about it, all of these stories that are coming out now, that day the board suddenly discovered that Tucker Carlson was a racist, or, part of, I think, what ties into this is that getting rid of Tucker was as much about power and all these other factors as it was about trying to figure out how they're going to explain to the board of directors, to shareholders, that they increased their settlement number by $250 million out of the blue without burning Rupert Murdoch. And I do think protecting Rupert Murdoch was a really big part of all of this.
Corporate survival. You burn Tucker. You don't burn Rupert. I mean, and that's
it.
He's the company. Rupert owns the company.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I mean, and the special master obviously would have been very bad for them, because one of the things that and this is still ongoing, but we filed a federal FEC complaint against Rupert Murdoch, because one of the things that came out is that he took a campaign ad from that Joe Biden's campaign purchased on Fox in October of 2020, before it was public. He took that information and gave that to Jared Kushner, who was working for Donald Trump's campaign. And so a non-public piece of campaign or strategy information is considered an in-kind contribution. That's well-established law. That's not an opinion. That's the way the law works. It's illegal. It's an illegal campaign contribution. So we filed a complaint with the FEC to say, hey, this requires investigation and sanction if you determine this. That's one example. If you look at the totality of all the information coming out, these things seemed very routine. So if you're the Murdoch and you all of a sudden get the court to appoint a special master who now gets full access to all of your files, all of your material, all of your communications, it's an enormous amount of liability. And I think it was the termination of Tucker and all of this was successful at least scapegoating Tucker, while at the same time ensuring that the Murdochs get to reassert control over a network that Tucker was increasingly, holding on to.
And so you're saying the special master is still?
Now that was a stipulation of the settlement. It's the second that the court settled, one of the conditions was that the special master would be disbanded by the court. And that's exactly what the court did. The day after the settlement was finished, the judge disbanded the special master. He rescinded his order appointing a special master. And so, it is significant that that took place. They might have gone through all of this if Rupert Murdoch wasn't necessarily in the barrel the way that he was personally.
Yeah.
Because of the special master.
Yeah. And honestly, when you put it that way, I mean, that's a different story.
Sure
it's not a Tucker Carlson story anymore. That's
it's not.
Why did the judge do that? What is that? I want to be clear. The judge ordered that at the request of Dominion, or the judge ordered it on his own or her own?
The judge determined, so in the week before the trial started, a whole bunch of information became clear. One, that communications specifically that Murdoch had were not turned over. Relevant communications. Communications that showed that he was involved in decision-making or was ignoring certain comments. So that then begins to raise questions as to how much other stuff wasn't turned over. And then this is when the judge made the decision. For the entire almost 2 years that the lawsuit was going on, Fox had argued repeatedly that Rupert Murdoch was not an officer of Fox News. He was an officer of Fox Corporation, but not Fox News, which is a subsidiary. A document was given on the Friday before the trial that listed Rupert Murdoch as an officer of Fox News. And this is to your point. The judge said, I'm sorry, wait a minute. You've been telling me this entire time that he's not an officer. I don't understand. Dominion then said, wait, well, we might have done things differently had we known this. We might have done things differently had we known this. And that changed. And that's when the judge said, I'm going to figure out what to do with this new information over the weekend, and I'll make my decision next week. And he came back and went to the special master. So, it was sort of the judge proactively doing it, especially after Dominion had indicated that they might have behaved differently, which is pretty no brainer.
But I mean, but it's still that interesting. You settle with Dominion. I mean, I wonder, I'd be curious to know what was said to the judge, because if the judge did that on his own, the judge doesn't have to be a party to the settlement, but I guess.
Well, the judge, I think in the judge's case, he would say he doesn't care, because if there's no point in getting to all these documents, now I guess he could have sanctioned them, which certainly would have been within his rights, and that would have been a perfectly appropriate thing to do. Now we may still get those documents though, because the Smartmatic lawsuit's proceeding, and they presumably will they'll have the discovery power. But it is not possible to tell the Tucker Carlson story or to really understand what happened that day without tying in the appointment of the special master. And so, that's a good and I think this sort of cloud of confusion about his departure is very much intentional and deliberate, because of the fact that they need to find a way to explain or rationalize why they would change their settlement offer out of the blue. And that's where this narrative emerged that, well, we suddenly discovered he was a racist. And if you notice that they even try to lay little crumbs where they say, well, the board of directors just discovered these text messages, but but everybody knew he was a racist. Like, this was well established. He said horrible things. It wasn't new information to them. So, but it's a new piece of narrative. It helps explain why something suddenly changed. And that's the hardest part. They need to find a compelling story, or at least one that's believable, as to why something suddenly changed in the last day or so of the trial that would allow them to, or convince them to, increase their settlement offer by $250 million.
So we're talking about a corporation. You mentioned its board. How beholden and or accountable is Rupert to that board?
It's barely a board of directors. It's a very small 6 people. 2 of them are Murdochs. One of them is Paul Ryan. The most independent person on the board is Paul Ryan. The other person that's on the board, the other person on the board is the former head CEO of COO of Fox, Chase Carey. It is a loyalist board. They are basically a proxy for Rupert Murdoch. So they have very little accountability. In fact, the part about it that I love is that the barely independent person, which is Paul Ryan, he's the one board member that kind of got them in trouble, because he sent messages to Rupert Murdoch during 2020 saying, hey, I'm reaching out to you as a fiduciary to say we might need to rethink our coverage because we could be in legal trouble. He wasn't saying that because he was concerned. If you're a board of directors and you don't exercise that authority, you're liable yourself. And so I think he was doing a little bit of, sort of CYA to make sure that he didn't get himself on the hook. But it is barely an accountable board. He has no accountability to them.
Right.
Obviously, they have legal obligations, and that's where this comes in.
Right.
But he's more accountable to the shareholders, and there are shareholder lawsuits that are happening right now. Some have already been filed. New ones are in the process of being filed. And the shareholder lawsuits are going to argue, hey, you didn't handle this well, and you cost us a bunch of money, and now we want to be paid because you cost us a bunch of money. And that's going to be an interesting sort of set of consequences that will flow out of this, is what happens with these shareholder lawsuits.
Just lastly on the settlement and how that unfolded, Angelo, do we have any sense of Rupert's lawyers? I'm wondering if he had attorneys around and said, look, dude, you don't want this smoke. You need to come up with that other $250 million after that special master. Because when you're in a corporation and you're looking at your bottom line, there's always some lawyers that come in and say, hey, you don't want to do this. And I'm just wondering, is that potentially also what might have happened? That's
really interesting. The one thing that, that's pretty interesting, because one thing that happened that day that we were watching is, starting that morning, every time you have a new lawyer representing you in court, you have to just submit a filing with the court to say, hey, this person is now my lawyer, so they can come to court. That morning, we noticed something strange. Late the night before, they submitted an update to their legal representation. They added 3 lawyers. Okay, that's new. The next morning, the day of the trial, they filed that. That happened overnight. Then they added another 2 lawyers, then another 3 lawyers. And that was happening all that morning. And to your point, they were all sorts of different. It's like, you don't add new defense lawyers the day of your trial. But what I think they were doing was expanding the circle. As more and more people started to think about all of these other potential liabilities and traps and say, to your point, hey, you don't want this. You need to settle. But they basically added, I think when all was done, 9 or 10 lawyers the day the trial started. So in those last few moments of the settlement, they were filing paperwork with the court to say, hey, this is our lawyer now, this is our lawyer now. They just kept expanding their team, which meant that more and more people were coming into the kitchen as they were figuring out how to handle these final moments. And I do think it ties into those last little bits of, this is just not going to play out well. You don't want the special master. You don't want any of this. And certainly I think that might have had a factor in sort of nudging them across the finish line here. If you could have people in the room explaining all the other pitfalls and risks that would be associated with letting this thing continue to unfold.
That's it. I had no idea. See, that pretty much answers my question.
Yeah, it was a big drama day. I mean, because the settlement happened that day. All that drama that was unfolding in those last hours kind of got lost because everybody felt that it was over. Right. But it was a pretty intense few hours there between Fox furiously adding more lawyers and then, the judge appointing a special master to investigate Rupert Murdoch. That alone is an explosive story if you think about it. And it just got totally swept away.
Yeah, it did.
In the news of the settlement.
So now, what about this though? Because I've seen some conflicting reporting on Tucker's actual employment situation. Has he been fired, or is he still on the payroll and they just canceled the show?
That's it. He's still on the payroll. He is not a fired employee. He's a employee of Fox right now and remains an employee of Fox. What they did is exercise a provision in his contract which allows them to not air his show.
Yeah.
And to not produce it. And so they can put him on ice, which is what they are doing, but keep him on the payroll. And as long as they pay him, he is restricted into what he can do. And I do think that's part of where this Twitter thing came from, is that it is a small workaround to his contract, because it's very clear that if he joined Newsmax or even Rumble, he would be in trouble. But in theory, he could probably post on social media, call it a show, even if it's not a show, just post sort of snippets and his and monologues and segments, and get away with not breaching his contract. My sense is that Tucker is prepared to walk away from. He's owed about $20 million on his contract, but he's prepared to walk away from that if it comes to it, because he thinks that he will make more money on the other end of it and also keep his power. There was some discussions in text messages that came out, and this sort of just shows the incredible economics at stage here. There were some text messages that came out as a part of these filings where Tucker was texting with someone that is still redacted, and they were doing some quick math on how much money Tucker would make if he launched his own program. And the numbers are astronomical. I mean, it's conceivable that Tucker could make $40 to $60 million on his own, just doing a subscription-based program, putting aside any advertising. And so they were even spitballing how much money Tucker would make. He knows he would have cash flow. What he needs is power, and that he'll never have again.
Yeah, that's gone. Can he make money on a Twitter show?
That's going to be hard.
Okay.
He might be able to get it through subscriptions. It won't be the same as if he had direct subscriptions, but he'll make some money that way. The numbers don't work out to be as substantial. He won't make it through advertising. He's just too toxic for advertising, and Twitter's revenue sharing there is going to be very marginal. But I think that the Twitter thing for him was Tucker just being mad about all the leaks and feeling like he was under attack from Fox, and wanting to demonstrate to Fox that he would be willing to fight back if they continued to from his perspective, malign. And I think that it was a shot across the bow to get Fox to ratchet down the pressure. And to some extent that worked, right? Fox sort of backed off a little bit, and they stopped poking the bear. And I think because they realized that they would actually, strangely, even if they would lose that fight, they would be severely injured, and they probably are permanently injured. as a result of this. And it is a real testament to how much Tucker was able to step into this void left by Rush Limbaugh as sort of like, the agenda setter within the larger right-wing echo chamber. His power was he was on the ascent. There's no doubt about it. And that influence obviously will hurt Fox quite a bit.
Permanently injured in terms of their audience and their following. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's right. I don't think they'll ever get back their audience. And they'll get back pieces of it, but they'll never get back the full. I mean, they probably lost about 30% of their audience. They'll maybe get back 10%. But when Fox terminated Tucker, their internal assessment, from my understanding, was that they anticipated they would lose 10% of their audience. And so when they were doing the cost benefit and the calculus, their own internals assessed that they would lose about 10% of their audience. At the time, I thought that number was probably closer to 20 and 30%. It's borne out to be that it obviously shot up to about 40%. And it now is in the low 30s. I think they'll get back another 10-ish%, but ultimately they'll lose between 20 and 25% of their audience permanently, that they will never get back. They will never go back to Fox. And that assumes that there's no more stoking of the fire, which I think will continue to happen within the right-wing media, because they obviously want to cannibalize Fox's audience. And so, they will never get back that audience. That audience is gone, and they will never come back.
What now? So what's the new lineup? We're just hearing about that now too.
They haven't formally announced it yet. They're toying with the idea of moving Sean Hannity to 8 o'clock.
Right.
And then shifting Jesse Waters, and Greg Gutfeld into prime time. I think Jesse's going to stay at 7 o'clock. I don't think that they're going to move him around. And it is possible that they move Greg Gutfeld into 9 p.m. I don't know why they're obsessed with Greg Gutfeld. They seem to think that he's some great savior. I think he's just a dope. I don't think he's interesting. I'm not a comedian, but I understand that he's supposed to be a comedian, but he doesn't even seem that funny. He just seems like an angry, short guy who says obnoxious jokes and somehow he calls himself a comedian. I thought that was an art form. Doesn't feel like art to me,
no,
but
it's not good.
he was their presenter at the Upfronts event. They had Greg Gutfeld go out to stage, to all the advertisers. They have the 2,000 advertisers that come to these events. This just happened a couple of days ago, and they put Greg Gutfeld out there front and center as if he was like the biggest thing on the planet, and he kind of bombed in that room. But for some reason they seem to think that he is just the absolute best, and I don't see it. I don't see it.
And so you say it didn't go over well. Where are the advertisers? What are they going to do? Are they?
They will. I don't think they're going to have a huge success. Fox has not had a successful upfront since 2018. Meaning they have not sold their inventory in advance since 2018. That is significant because it means that they end up getting less ads, less revenue from that. They've made the decision that it's okay because they'll make it up with these cable companies. I think the sense is that Fox is sort of weakened right now, and most advertisers will keep their powder dry. There are some that will buy ads, like the direct response advertisers. So there's this company that sells powdered vegetables in pill form that you can buy. They will probably increase their ad buy, and MyPillow obviously will buy, and but they won't get back. They won't get any huge like blue chip advertisers just yet. And the event didn't go well. I mean, even in most of the reporting from it didn't go well. And that's because Fox just doesn't have a compelling sell right now. They don't have the audience they've had. They can't say that they have the biggest audience. That's not true anymore. They know everyone's mad at them. They're kind of toxic from a democracy perspective. And now they have this specter of what's going to be a pretty seemingly controversial election cycle. And even so, they can't even capitalize on it. They have to share the spotlight now with other competitors. Typically, Fox is alone when it comes to hosting, especially the debates. They usually get to be the only sponsor, and This year, the RNC is making them share it with this online platform called Rumble, which is like a YouTube alternative. And so the first primary debate is actually being co-hosted by Fox and Rumble. Rumble gets exclusive digital and online streaming, which means if you're an advertiser, that used to be a thing Fox would sell you on, or say, hey, look, we're going to have exclusives for all of these big debates, which are big. Look, those are big ratings draws, especially in a presidential year. So if you're an advertiser, like, oh, that's a sweet spot. That means I'm going to get a lot of eyeballs on my stuff. Right now, though, Fox doesn't get to do that. What Fox gets is a TV shot, and then Rumble gets all the online. So if you're an advertiser, it even it dilutes your pitch to the advertisers in a way that they're going to have to adapt. And if you really want to think about not just Fox's position with advertisers, but Fox's position in the larger right-wing media, the idea that the RNC told Fox this year that they needed to share that debate with Rumble tells you about how much the landscape is changing, where the power is, and where Fox sort of sits within that landscape in the current moment. They're still a uniquely destructive force. They're still disproportionately influential and powerful, but there is a lot of movement right now, and we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that that we're in this place that's about as close to the late 90s when Fox News and talk was born and talk radio was on the ascent. We're kind of had this reset. What's happening over the next year or so is going to shape what the larger right-wing media landscape looks like for the next few decades. And this is the first time, literally, in 25 years that the actual landscape is going to change. It's going to either change for the worse, or it's going to end up changing that it's much more atomized and they're weaker and they're less destructive.
Lastly, cable fees. That's being negotiated now? Right
now. Fox, and that's the other part about the trial that people should keep in mind, is that Fox is actually at the table this month. It started last month. They're at the table. It's still going on with 3 companies: Charter, Xfinity, and Cox. So Charter is Spectrum, Xfinity is Comcast, and then Cox. That is a big deal because there are combined, that is 36 million customers. 36 million customers right now are having their fees renegotiated. The good sign is that we've been organizing, people making calls, thousands of phone calls. I know that we were out calling Fox right now. There's this group of coalition of people. People can find out how to do it. They can go to nofoxfee.com. It gives you all the information to contact these cable companies, how you do it, what to say, so that it gets counted. Every single call gets counted. It's like it's almost like a scale. These cable companies keep track because that then goes into inform their metric. And I would just say, we had one fight with the cable companies back in December, and Fox and the Murdochs lost their very first cable fight ever. And it was over Fox Sports. And we held the line with one of the providers. Fox lost $400 million on that deal. One deal. So these 3 combined are worth about $1 billion. Well, if Fox gets what they want, Fox will make $1 billion extra dollars a year in profit just from these 3 companies, $3.2 billion over the terms of the contract. If Fox does not get what they want here, and we hold the line, Fox News becomes unprofitable in 14 months, maybe less. And that is unimaginable a few months ago, that Fox would ever become unprofitable. So I think that the significance of these fees, we've been talking about this for a long time. This is the first time in years that there's actually an active Fox News cable fight happening. And it should have been 8 to 5 weeks ago. And yet it hasn't been. And that's because of the fact that the deal is being ground down. This is what organizing looks like, and so I would just say this is the first run at this.
NoFoxFeed.com, folks.
That's
Go there and find out about it. Get involved in that. Angelo Carusone. And there's another lawsuit pending, at least one other one, right?
There is. The other voting system is Smartmatic, and that's in New York. That is set for trial in 2024. They're currently doing discovery, and they'll do depositions probably later in the summer, early fall, and maybe even rolling into the early parts of next year. So far, Fox has said they're not going to settle that, but they said that the last time. And then once they got, Dominion got the goods, they settled. But I think what they're trying to do is run out the clock on that for as long as they possibly can to get through this initial storm.
All right. The vultures are circling, and they should be. NoFoxFeed.com, folks. Check it out. Angelo Carusone, the president of Media Matters for America, MediaMatters.org. Check out all the latest news there as well. Thanks as always, buddy, and happy birthday again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. As always, perform an act of kindness on behalf of an elder or young person. Write a letter to a sister or brother who just so happens to find her or himself incarcerated. Offer libations to the ancestors upon whose sturdy shoulders we all now stand. And above all, give thanks to the God of your understanding by whatever name you call her and him. All God asks of us is that we give each other love. Thanks for giving MIP love. And please remember to subscribe and give us a 5-star rating. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.